It is now 9 o'clock, so I will call the Policy Committee meeting to order. Welcome everyone for joining us. I guess I will have to move to have the approval of the agenda since we have two committee members at this time. Mr. Ravenbart, will you second the motion?
I will.
Okay. And those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I ask that we move to approve.
And Ms. Nichols, I apologize for interrupting. I know it seems silly since there's only two of you, but if you would just say your name and identify yourself before you vote, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you. All right. For the agenda, Jeanette Nichols approves and Mr. Ravenbart?
Bill Ravenbart approves.
Okay. So approval, we lost it. Okay. Approval of the minutes from the May 12th, 2020 committee meeting. I move that we approve those minutes.
I second Bill Ravenbart.
Okay. To approve the minutes, Jeanette Nichols, yes.
And Bill Ravenbart, yes.
Okay. So now we are to the policy updates from the North Carolina School Board Association. So our first policy, and I think the process, since we have so many policies, we will hold them all until, unless we want to hold a vote to send them forward for the July board meeting. Is that okay? Rather than voting individually. But if we have any to hold back, we can vote then on that. That work?
That work for me.
Okay. So is it McKenna or who's going to do this today? Or Janine?
No, Janine's not here today. She couldn't make it actually.
Okay.
So how do you all want to do this? Do you want to go policy by policy and talk them through, or do you just want to go in order? How do you normally?
How about the order that we received them in? So starting with 2000?
Okay. I mean,
is that,
sure.
What do you think?
Sure. So, okay. So policy 2000, this is an optional policy. You can change this however you'd like. Now you have policy 1810. And so I sent you our policy 2000, but if you want to incorporate some or all of the language from your old policy 1810 or make other changes, this is something that you're really free to customize however you'd like it.
The only thing I was thinking about as I read through it was number 2, when we say maintaining effective board and superintendent relations, we need to include in there the community and our legislative and governmental relationships, especially community at this point. That's a very, especially with our new superintendent, to bring the community together. So, Bill, what do you think?
It's a little confusing to me. What are you asking me, Jeanette?
I'm saying where we talk about maintaining effective board and superintendent relations, I think we need to also say maintaining effective community, legislative, and governmental relations.
If it's not anywhere else in the policy, I think that would be good.
That was in the old policy.
Okay.
I'm Ms. Nichols, Dale Burns here. Good morning. Something you might consider is maintaining a separate board superintendent relations policy to be very clear about the expectations of the board regarding that particular relationship. The community, the legislative relationships as a separate policy might be of value. I do think having the focus of one particular policy only on board superintendent relations is important. The superintendent is the employee that the board employs and the board evaluates. And I think that relationship is very special. It needs to be well defined. And I think there's value in having it stand alone. You can certainly include those other matters, but I would suggest that perhaps you think about an additional policy for those external relationships.
Okay.
Ms. Nichols, if I might, the next policy that I think you'll get to is 2010 boards and superintendent relations, which is I think going to meet what Dr. Burns is describing. This one, at least from my reading, is a very aspirational sort of statement about the board's goals. But I certainly agree with Dr. Burns that I think that you wouldn't want to muddle the board superintendent relations.
Also, once you get to the section 5000, which is the entire sections about community relations, there are policies in there that specifically talk about the board's relationship with the community too.
Oh, okay, alrighty. And Dr. Burns, do you have your microphone up close? Because you are faint.
Am I faint? Am I still faint, Ms. Nichols?
Now that sounds good.
Well, this headset mic kind of works when it's right. Thank you.
So are we saying we don't even need number 2 in this one, Deborah?
No, I don't think so at all. I just was pointing out that the next policy goes into a lot of detail. This one is very goal oriented. And I think your previous policy 1810 does have those other, it is really just in the form of a list like this one.
Yes.
And so that's really up to the board what items from that list you would want to include as your goals. But this is just a very short statement of goals. And other policies will flesh those out more, I think.
So what do you think, Bill?
That's fine. That's fine with me.
Okay. Okay.
Sure.
Bill, did you have anything on 2010?
No, ma'am?
I liked everything you pulled in there. That makes it very clear and maybe no one will ever question. Okay, so 2100. This is a new one. So McKenna.
All right, let's get that one open. Great. This is just, I mean, this is just talking about the board's a corporate body and that board members only have authority when acting as part of the board. I mean, that's just, there's really nothing to change about that.
It's a good reminder. So the cross-reference comes from, is your policy, the new policy manual?
Yeah, the cross-references are the policies in the new manual. That
Okay. Bill?
Yes,
Anything?
ma'am. No, ma'am? Everything's good?
Righty. Then we'll move to 2110.
So this one's about your board member elections. Do you have any specific questions about it?
The second paragraph under A, there just seems to be so many boards. Any person elected or appointed to the board and also employed by the board. Can we say employed by New Hanover County Schools?
If you'd like, sure.
Because I don't know. We've always been told, or as long as I can remember, we only have one employee, and that's the superintendent. So it.
Well, and Ms. Nichols, if I might, actually, the board is the employer of all employees within the school district. The only one that you select directly is the superintendent, but the superintendent brings you only recommendations and you act as a board on those recommendations.
Yeah.
I think the language in that may be a little clunky, but it's important. It's an important principle that, for example, a teacher cannot serve both as a board member and as an employee of the board within the school district.
I know I had to quit in the middle of the school year in order to be on the board. But a parent said half a year with Mrs. Nichols was like a whole year. So I was hoping. Okay, so you don't think we need to change and add New Hanover County Schools, just keep it as board?
I think that this is the legal principle and that is correct, and I would hate to confuse that.
Thank you, Deborah. Okay. I like the oath in there. That's really good. And the terms. And we've got all the updates of the statutes. That's very good. No cross references at this time?
No, none. I mean,
Nothing. Okay. Bill, anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay. 2115.
Okay, this one we actually need to change. Deborah pointed out to me last night. So this information, the way it's written right now, says that it's the county executive committee of the political party of the vacating member who's going to appoint the new member, but it's really the board under state law, under 115C-37.1. It's the board who appoints the person, and the board consults with the county executive committee of the political party of the vacating member and appoints the person recommended by the party executive committee if the committee makes a recommendation within 30 days. So I sent Tabitha a copy this morning, but it was too late to distribute it to you. But the language in this needs to be adjusted to reflect that it's the board appointing on the recommendation of the committee.
And that's the only thing that changes is the board instead of the committee.
Yeah,
Okay, that's fine.
and that's just based on the law, so there's no.
It's a little, you'll see that under legal references, 115C37 is marked out, and then there's some session laws. And those session laws are the source of the election methods for the new Hanover County Board of Education. And they actually say that the county executive committee would fill the vacancy, but there's a general statute that contradicts that, 115C 37.1 for partisan boards of education, that goes into more detail. And so you have to read both of them together in order to get the correct language for this policy. And so that's the change that would be made. You all are one of a handful of partisan school boards that are falling under this particular statute.
If the executive committee sent someone to the board, has the board got to take that person?
Excuse me. Under the statute, then if they make the recommendation within 30 days, then the board is required to fill the vacancy with the person recommended by the executive committee.
Okay.
It's silent, but I assume, using general principles of statutory construction, if they do not make a recommendation within 30 days, then the board would fill that vacancy on its own.
Okay.
So McKenna, would you read what you sent to Tabitha this morning, and we can verbally approve it?
Yes, wait a minute, where did that go? All vacancies in the membership of the Board of Education caused by death, resignation, or otherwise will be filled by a person appointed by the remaining members of the board. The board will consult with the county executive committee of the political party of the vacating member and appoint the person recommended by that party executive committee if the party executive committee makes a recommendation within 30 days of the occurrence of the vacancy. The person appointed will serve for the unexpired term.
Okay, that works.
And then in the legal references, there's an added reference to GS 115C-37.1.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
All righty. So we'll have that in for the July meeting in that new text. Okay. Moving on to 2116, which is another new policy.
This is just about removal from office. This is all from statute.
Okay. And will we add cross references later on? Or should we add the previous one as a cross reference? The appointment. Is that necessary? 2115?
So if you'd like to, we can.
Okay.
Okay.
We had a board member years ago that had to quit because of the other. Okay, so 2116, Bill, ready to move on with it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, here's a busy one. 2121.
Just skip 2120.
Oh,
No, 2120. You had already looked at with the first.
I'm sorry.
yeah, that was because of that.
Okay, so 2121. Yeah, this is it tries to encompass all of the conflicts of interest laws that would apply. So I don't know. Do you have any questions about any of it? One thing in particular about that you have discretion on is the amount of money, the dollar values for what you would consider something to be of nominal value. We just in our standard policy, we use $50, but the board can change that. So we changed it to 25. I changed it to $25 because that's what you had in your old policy. That's how you defined nominal value, which is fine. I mean, however, whatever amount you think. That's
I would say with the increase of everything costing more, that's redundant, isn't it? Anyway, I would say $50.
Okay.
Bill, what do you think?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Deborah, is there any need for board members to make a conflict of interest statement or to sign anything? We do, I know on my state board, we have to make a conflict of interest statement, or we go through a form that we file every year. But is there anything like that on local boards?
You mean a financial disclosure statement or something like that?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm not aware of a requirement like that for school board members. McKenna, do you? I don't believe that's the case. It is, I mean, as you can see from this policy, it's very detailed. There are a lot of different sources of potential regulation of conflict of interest, and it is something to be aware of and be sure that board members understand. But as far as affirmative yearly statement, financial statement, that's not required. But for example, anytime there might be something coming to the board for consideration, it's important to understand these rules and whether there's a potential for a conflict.
Is there anything that as part of the like NCSBA training or anything like that, that they have it in a format so that board members can see this and be aware of it? Because this is a lot of information. I just think it would be helpful to have it for board members to see and make sure that there is no possible way that they have any kind of conflict before they are voting. I don't know how to make sure that, you know, we can get this in front of our board members and say, okay, you know, if you have any kind of relationship, you know, because it's not just monetary, it's also relationship based.
Are you asking about maybe a flow chart or an outline or something that's easily digestible that you could use as a handout or a resource for board members?
Something like that, even with, you know, we were talking about onboarding the new board members. I think something like that would be very valuable.
I mean, I was actually just having a conversation. We're a little off topic, but talking about some new board member training with some of my partners, and you know, I'd be glad to talk to you about that and what might be helpful in you know, aside from the policy review. We can certainly talk about that.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Sorry to drag this sideways, but I mean, I was thinking even attaching that to this policy somehow would be helpful, but maybe that's not possible, but having that in some format would be great.
I'll make a note of that and do something for you.
Okay,
well,
thank you.
it could go into the handbook for the new board members.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be helpful. Anything on? So the $100 for the 12-month period works for you, Bill?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Alrighty. So 2121 moving forward. 2122.
Okay, this one I added a bunch of information from your old policy also.
Okay, second paragraph, third line from the bottom where it says board members must remain neutral during a pending dispute as they later may need, wouldn't you put a need to serve?
Yes.
Okay. I could not find our 1601 anywhere. What happened to it? The old.
So, yeah, when I had initially, we had taken, I started working on your manual before we started converting it, and that policy was online on your old website, but then when we received the policies to post on the new website, that wasn't part of it. So I wasn't sure whether that was even a current policy or whether that had been repealed. But I mean, I figured it wouldn't hurt to add the information. If you didn't want it, we could take it out. But
I think also that the board's current policy 9510 addresses, it's the public parent complaint policy, and it addresses some of these same topics.
That's where it was. Okay. Thank you. Now this is good. This is has everything in there, and certainly encourages.
This is basically what we're already doing. Is that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to look at 1601 again to make sure that we didn't leave anything out. But we had worked on that one quite often. And this, again, is one that's really important, Lisa, for the board members to be truly aware of every facet of it. Because
You are correct.
Often it doesn't work. Or it's not followed, let's say that. Mm-hmm. It would work if it's followed. Okay. And Dr. Burns, I appreciate the fact that you have been responding to members of our community who are complaining.
Well, again, I think it goes back to the importance of an effective onboarding plan for our new board members.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So 2122, 2123.
This is about board training. Is there anything you want to change?
No. That's good. I'm assuming our ethics training, everything's going to be remotely done as it has in the past, which works well and gives new board members options of times to cover that training. Okay, so that's good.
Looks good to me.
Alrighty, thanks. And we have another new one, 2125. And what's the 7315?
So that means the policy, so the 2000, section 2000 has to do with the board operations. So that's why I'm here, because this applies to board members. Board members have to keep confidential information confidential, but it's also, the policy also applies to employees. And so the 7000s are the personnel policies. So this policy will also be located in both places.
Okay. It's unfortunate that somebody didn't read this one a long time ago. Okay. So all the cross references, I see. Okay, great. That's perfect. Okay. Bill?
Yes, ma'am.
You ready for this
Yes,
one?
ma'am. Looks
Okay.
good.
All right, another new one. 2127.
This one is actually new for our manual. Also, we just developed this policy, and it's mostly developed as a reminder to board members that when they're it's talking about their responsibilities for when they're using school system technological resources, but also reminding that if you're conducting board business, that information is subject to public records. So even if you're using your personal technology, that doesn't mean it's not a public record. And so that you need to be aware of that.
On page 4, number 3, Do we need, we have 5 official websites. Do we need to list all of them, or just, they may change, I'm not sure. We have LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Instagram, as well as Facebook and Twitter.
You can leave me, you can leave me out of that because I don't know how to work any of those.
I don't work them either, because I see things I don't want to see.
Yeah, I think that maybe instead of listing those, you might include, just say, the school system's official social media accounts. I'd hate for us to get into an alphabet soup of different online platforms, especially where they change. I don't, 5 years from now, it might look like you had MySpace up there. Things get outdated quickly.
And that's what I was thinking too. But if we were going to list 2 of them, we should list all 5. But yes, if we could just say something in a generic form so that they know that we offer a variety of websites, official websites, or whatever.
Okay, so we can rewrite it to say the school system controls and maintains the school system's official websites as well as their official social media accounts?
Yes.
Okay.
Deborah, what about individual board members also some have their personal sites, and then they have their political sites. What are the guidelines for, are there different guidelines for both? So if you have a personal web, and I'm asking that because I have heard that if you have a political site that is tied to you running for Board of Education, those are subject to free speech rights. If you have a personal site, they are not subject to those rights. If you have not posted anything that is tied to your political career. Is that the case? And do we need to state that here?
I think that, well, first of all, that's just it's an entirely fraught area, and it's not, unfortunately, subject to easy, black lines.
Right.
But I agree that when you are using, when a board member has a personal social media account that is not, not a board member account, I'm sorry, Board of Education account, but their own account that they open, say you had an account that you opened under your own name. If you are using it as in your capacity as a public official, if you are, engaging sort of as a Board of Education member or as a, as a public official, then you are potentially open to First Amendment issues. And there was actually a recent case that addressed the president's, social media account and blocking people on Twitter because he had opened it up as a public forum. And I think that those are going to be really case-by-case evaluations. If you have, your own personal account as Lisa Estep, and you're just posting pictures of your family and your friends and talking, privately, there's going to be I think a much more difficult argument that that's a public forum. But if you are creating it as Lisa Estep, chairman or chair of the Board of Education, and you're engaging with the public on issues about public concern, matters of public interest, and then you decide to start blocking people on that, it could certainly be a question of a First Amendment issue. So I think the guidelines here are good and they don't necessarily differentiate between personal, private personal, and personal candidate personal. But board members do need to be aware of that potential risk. And I will say that, I think this is an important policy to draw attention to all of those areas, as McKenna said, using private cell phones and email accounts to conduct public business is an area that I remind boards that I advise all the time that you should not use, these personal accounts because they're all subject to public records requests.
It's not super detailed, but in C3C, it does point out that board members should be aware that when they use personal social media accounts in their capacity as a public official and allow community members to post comments publicly on the account, they may be creating a public forum, and that there's First Amendment concerns with that.
So that is referring to their personal social media, not their public social media account. Is that correct?
So in personal, as in it's theirs in their own capacity, as opposed to
the political one that they formed, maybe.
Well,
okay.
No, this saying your political account is a personal account.
Okay.
But you're using it as a public official. It's a personal account in that it's not the board's account. It's not an official.
Right. Okay.
But if you're using it as a public official in that way, then you have to be concerned about the First Amendment implications.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. Yep. This is a good one for our board to review.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. Deborah, thank you for your input on this one for sure.
Yep.
Bill, anything?
No, ma'am. I think that's a good one, though.
Yes, absolutely. We needed it earlier. Okay, 2130.
Okay. This one's about board member compensation and expense reimbursement. So there is some, I added some information based on what you had in your old policy, 1236.
Okay, let's look at B. We're talking about the funds. We have in our policy, the unused funds can roll over but not to exceed $5,000. Are we still going to, if we're going to do that, and I didn't know if Mary Hazel had seen this or not, we should address this. And wouldn't it not come under B?
Yeah. Do you want that added? Okay, let me. Trying to pull up your old policy so I can see what the language was.
McKenna, it says unused travel funds during 1 year will be rolled over and added to the next year's allocation. No allocation shall exceed $5,000.
Okay.
I think, Ms. Nichols, I think that's what you're referring to, isn't it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so you want that added in section B?
Yes.
Okay. We can add that. Yeah, we can add it at the end of the first paragraph of B before it starts dividing up.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now, third paragraph in one. Boy, this is a big change. We don't have this, but it's good. Very good. So, how is the board chair going to keep records of all of this?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that too, but I would say maybe the board chair in conjunction with the board admin assistant, because right now Tabitha is the one that keeps track of that. Because I certainly don't have an accounting book with that information. I hate to tell you all, but Tabitha does. She keeps track of that along with Mary Hazel. So maybe a reference to the admin assistant who I think tracks that along with the finance department. So I don't know how detailed you want to go.
because she does all the booking and arrangements. So, yeah, the board chair would have, that would be a challenge to keep up with all of that.
Okay, where exactly are you looking?
Third
back.
paragraph under 1.
Okay,
B1.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know that you should have the prior written approval of the board chair. We've never done that.
Mm-mm. And the out of state by the whole board, we've never done that either.
Mm-mm.
I
mean, I don't think it's a bad idea to have a full board discussion if you're doing an out of state professional development, because typically those are going to cost more, and you want to know that you're getting what you're paying for. And certainly there was quite a vigorous discussion when Nelson and I went to California, and it was a good learning opportunity to discuss that, to decide, okay, was that a valuable opportunity, and should board members be a part of that discussion? So I think going forward, is that something that the board should talk about? If there's an opportunity in Colorado, is it worth the funds to attend that, and can that information be brought back to the entire board to use, as opposed to going somewhere more local? So is that something that's valuable? Would that be something valuable to the board to discuss ahead of time? But I don't think the board chair should decide that. I think that should be a board discussion.
Ms. Eastep and board members, some boards that I'm aware of, they have a discussion, and the entire board will select different conferences or trainings that are appropriate for the board, and that the entire board or certain board members will go to in that year. Sort of there's a discussion ahead of time about which of the conferences or professional developments are worthwhile and will come back, and that and then there's a set budget for each board member, and within those pre-approved conferences, they can choose which ones to go to within their individual budget. So that's just something to think about, maybe a way to approach it.
I think that's a great idea.
I do too. That cut out a whole lot of arguing.
I think it would, and then it creates I'm going to do my own thing, and then you do your own thing when you get back, and then no one gets anywhere with what they've learned.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be contained? Is that, Deborah, is that captured in this language here, or could we capture that in language here, so that prior authorization, that prior discussion happens?
I think that you certainly could. I don't know that this, I do think the way this is written, it is more of a insulated, one board member goes to the board chair and asks for approval, and doesn't have that sort of discussion component. I don't have any language off the top of my head to replace it with, but that may be one that you want to think a little bit more about, and maybe.
That's something that we've just turned over 40 people on the board a year and a half ago, and getting ready to turn at least 3 more over this year. So I think that would be really nice to have that in place.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Maybe it's worth taking this one off for July and spending some time getting it right, and putting it with the next group from the 2000s.
I agree with that.
And maybe thinking of, yes, how we're going to document all of this and keep up with it. Okay. So,
Are we going to do that? Is that something that we're going to do?
Well, someone
Rewrite it?
Would you like me to work with McKenna to bring some language back?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Please.
I did just want to point out, while we're on this one, the very first paragraph about compensation, and I may be telling you something you already know, I think a lot of board members aren't aware of how their compensation is set. And I just wanted to point out that this board's, in the original 1963 session law, it's set at $50 for the board chair and $40 for board members. I'm not sure if the commissioners have increased that over the years, but the county commissioners have the power to increase that amount, not board members themselves or the board itself. And that also we would recommend that whenever you have budget, whenever you're budgeting for the professional development and the conferences and those expenses, those are very clearly set out in the board's budget, because the county commissioners also under statute need to approve those. So I just wanted to.
Oh, you're muted, Deborah.
Yep, sorry, it's not really explained in a lot of detail.
Can you repeat that again? You're saying that we had to have gotten permission from the commissioners to up our professional development budget every year?
I think what I'm saying is that under the statute, the commissioners are supposed to approve those expenses, compensation and expenses. And I just think that best practice is to always have those expenses set out very clearly in the budget, so that there can't be any question that the commissioners didn't approve it.
Okay.
So when you go through this again, Deborah, you'll add everything that we need to make sure we do the right thing?
Well, I think if you can go back up to the first paragraph, I think it's clear that, you know, this compensation is set by applicable law. I just didn't know. I think that I have had the experience of board members not understanding what that applicable law is and where the authority comes from. And sometimes they think that they have the authority to increase their own monthly stipend, and that's just not the case. So I just wanted to point that out while we were here. Again, when you're having a lot of new board members come on, it's something that always bears reminding folks, but I'll be glad to work on some language, paragraph B1, to reflect what the board was, the discussion we just had.
Good, yeah. There's going to be a lot of learning for the new board members. Okay. So we're going to hold this one for revisions and additions. So now we're to 2140.
Yeah, so if you could open that one.
Sorry, I'm looking for it.
So 2140, we actually, in our manual, we don't have, so we don't have a policy about, we have a policy about defensive board employees. We don't actually have one on defensive board members. So I took the policy, we have defensive board employees, and in fact, we can change the title too to make it defensive board members and employees. But changed it just to make it so that it also applies to the board members. I made some other changes based on your old policy, but the one thing, your old policy talked a lot about, also addressed payment of claims or judgments. Does your board pay for civil judgments entered against individuals as opposed to judgments against the actual board itself?
We're doing that right now, aren't we, Lisa? With some of the lawsuits going on, there's people that don't work with us anymore.
That's actually the defense. So the insurance, board's insurance company is providing the defense. Whether or not a judgment is paid, I'm not aware of that happening at this point, but that's something that I do think is it's a significant undertaking to commit to paying a judgment if someone is determined to have done something wrong, as opposed to paying the defense to challenge the accusation that they've done something wrong.
Okay.
This policy does not say that you're going to pay for the judgments. It's only saying that you're going to pay for the defense. And so if you are going to pay for judgments, you have to create uniform standards under which claims or made or civil judgments entered will be paid. Under 115C43 requires that you have uniform standards for that. So if you do that, you will need to adjust this, add information to this policy. But if you're not paying claims, then it's not an issue.
But they're going to come after us anyway, right?
Yeah, this is, yeah, I mean, if you're, yeah, they're going to come after the board, and if it's a judgment against the board, that's a different issue as opposed to.
But if we're paying for someone's defense, you know, are you saying that we can pay for the defense, but we don't have to pay the judgment?
Mm-hmm.
But any good lawyer is going to come right after us hard and fast.
Well, I don't think so. So, you know, for example, the board as a whole could be sued for actions it has taken or omissions of oversight.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is a trial and a jury decides the Board of Education was wrong and is liable, then there could be a judgment entered against the Board of Education as a whole that the board would be liable to pay unless there was immunity. If an individual board member is sued, whether or not the entire board is sued, this policy would allow the board to provide a defense for that individual board member. But it is not necessarily saying that if the board member individually is found liable and has a judgment entered against him or her, that the board will then pay that amount as well. So there are two different things, and I don't know that providing a defense obligates the board to then also pay a judgment.
Okay.
And in fact, the policy says at the very last paragraph, the board does, by enacting the policy, the board does not intend to create any contractual rights between the board and individual members or employees, and the policy should not be construed to create any contract terms or substantive rights.
Okay.
And then, so I think that it's really extending a benefit to board members and employees, saying we will provide you a defense, whether that's through purchasing insurance that pays for a lawyer or paying it directly. One suggestion I might make is in the very last sentences to say the policy should not be construed to waive any claim of immunity, and I would add, or other defense that the board might otherwise be entitled to make.
Okay.
Read that again, please, Deborah.
After the word immunity in the very last sentence, I would add, or other defense.
Okay. And we're going to change the title.
Yeah.
Okay. To read Defense of Board Members and Employees.
And that's it.
Okay. did we get Mr. Boyer on at all today? Tabitha,
Yes.
did Mr. Boyer contact you, or has he signed on or anything?
No, ma'am, he has not
Okay.
signed on.
Okay, so, the,
Miss Stagner and Miss Osborne, it sure is nice to have people as smart as y'all helping us.
isn't that the truth?
It's the most wonderful thing I've ever experienced in my life. Thank you.
We're gonna keep.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, so with all the policies that were presented, except for 2130, I move that we, with the modifications that we,
Oh, can't hear you, Jeanette.
I'm sorry, am I
There you go.
muted?
Yeah,
Okay.
gotcha now.
All right, thank you. I move that the policies that were presented today with discussion and modifications where needed, except for policy 2130, that we have them ready for the July 7th board meeting for first reading.
I second. Bill Rivenbark.
So those in favor of the motion, aye. Jeanette Nichols.
Aye, Bill Rivenbark.
So they will be ready for July 7th. The policy 2130, we will hold for Deborah to add information that will make it more clear, and we will have that on the agenda for our next policy committee meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll do that.
Okay, that's great. So, the agenda. The policy update from our school system. The policy 5400 naming of facilities was tabled. Recommendations to review the policy, discuss and consider appropriate action. Have we done anything with that one yet?
Now, I was going to gather up some additional policies, and I apologize. I wasn't clear that it was going to be on for this meeting, but I can certainly have it ready for the next policy committee meeting.
Okay. Well, as long as we address it, but it's kind of quiet out there right now, and that's a good thing. But we do need to fairly name or rename. Okay, so anything else, Mr. Rivenbark, that you want to talk about before we adjourn?
No, ma'am. Not anything to do with the school board.
So I move that we adjourn this policy committee meeting and thank everyone for their participation. Is there a second?
Second. Bill Rivenbark.
And those in favor? Aye. Jeanette Nichols.
Aye, Bill Rivenbark.
Okay. So we are now adjourned. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, all of you.
Thank you.
Great work. Thank you.